Welcome to our podcast on expanding your English vocabulary together.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in as we explore important words today.
Today we'll cover the words forgive somebody, stare at somebody, aggressive, inevitable, and put a strain on somebody to help new viewers be aware of these vocabs in our podcast.
Forgive somebody is a phrasal verb.
It means to stop feeling angry or resentful towards someone who has hurt or offended you.
A synonym of forgive somebody is pardon, and an antonym is hold a grudge. She decided to forgive him after he apologized sincerely.
He found it hard to forgive his friend for breaking the promise.
Parents often forgive their children for small mistakes.
She couldn't forgive her colleague for taking credit unfairly.
I chose to forgive my sister for forgetting my birthday.
They eventually forgave the company for the billing error.
He asked me to forgive him after realizing his harsh words.
Many people struggle to forgive themselves for past failures.
We should forgive our enemies to free ourselves from negativity.
She learned to forgive her ex and move on with her life.
He asked God to forgive him during his private prayer.
After years of silence, they finally forgave each other.
She had to forgive her landlord for the noisy renovations.
It took time to forgive his betrayal, but she managed.
He taught his children to forgive bullies instead of retaliating.
She couldn't forgive the driver for nearly causing an accident.
He chose to forgive the mistake rather than demand retribution.
She asked him to forgive the delay in delivering her package.
He was willing to forgive her lateness because she had a valid excuse.
We must forgive mistakes if we want a healthy relationship.
She tried to forgive her boss after the unfair criticism.
He whispered, "I forgive you," to forgive his friend on their voicemail.
She called her mother to forgive her for a harsh remark.
We can learn to forgive strangers who unintentionally offend us.
He urged the crowd to forgive the speaker for the technical glitch.
She found it easier to forgive quickly once she understood the reason.
He decided to forgive completely and let go of lingering anger.
She learned that to forgive freely is an act of strength.
He asked his therapist how to forgive oneself after the accident.
She learned when to forgive but not forget for healthy boundaries.
He chose to forgive unconditionally without demanding an apology.
We often need to forgive in advance to avoid bitterness.
She encouraged him to forgive compassionately to heal their friendship.
He struggled to forgive his own errors in the project report.
She realized she had to forgive and move forward to find peace.
After the meeting, he felt ready to forgive and reconcile.
She taught her students to forgive mistakes as part of teamwork.
He tried to forgive without harboring resentment to stay positive.
She decided to forgive and rebuild trust with her partner. Stare at somebody is a phrasal verb.
It means to look at someone for a long time, often in a fixed or rude way.
A synonym of stare at somebody is gaze at somebody when done politely, and an antonym is glance away. He began to stare at her when she entered the room wearing a bright dress.
People sometimes stare at strangers on public transport out of curiosity.
She noticed him staring at her during the entire meeting.
Don't stare at somebody if you want to be polite in a foreign country.
Kids often stare at somebody who looks different.
She felt uncomfortable when he stared at her phone screen over her shoulder.
He would stare at his reflection in the mirror whenever he felt insecure.
Tourists sometimes stare at street performers in amazement.
She decided to stare at the painting to appreciate its details.
He accidentally stared at somebody with his mouth open.
They told their children not to stare at strangers for safety reasons.
The teacher caught him staring at the clock instead of taking notes.
People often stare at celebrities during public appearances.
He felt awkward when passers-by stared at somebody taking selfies.
She asked him to stop staring at her sketchbook.
Drivers sometimes stare at their phones instead of the road.
He couldn't help but stare at the new billboard in amazement.
She told him not to stare at her scars, out of respect.
We warned our guests not to stare at somebody wearing unusual attire.
She decided to stare at the ocean to calm her mind.
He refused to stare at the test results until he was ready.
Tourists stared at somebody playing traditional instruments on the street corner.
He began to stare at the menu indecisively.
She caught him staring at the dessert case in delight.
Parents advise children not to stare at somebody who is eating.
She felt self-conscious when he stared at her drawing.
He scolded his friend for staring at somebody in the locker room.
She laughed when the cat stared at somebody returning home.
He couldn't stop staring at somebody dancing gracefully on stage.
She asked the stranger not to stare at her so intently.
We often stare at somebody we haven't seen in years.
She warned him about the cafe dog who loves to stare at somebody while waiting for treats.
He confessed he used to stare at the stars every night as a child.
Tourists often stare at somebody photographing landmarks.
She hesitated to stare at the wound on her arm.
He decided to stare at the horizon to clear his thoughts.
They told visitors not to stare at somebody handling dangerous equipment.
She giggled when the baby stared at somebody clumsily dancing.
He found himself staring at the clock as the lecture dragged on. Aggressive is an adjective.
It describes a forceful, hostile, or attacking behavior or style.
A synonym of aggressive is hostile, and an antonym is passive. He used an aggressive sales pitch to close the deal quickly.
The dog displayed aggressive barking when strangers approached.
She took an aggressive stance in the debate and won applause.
Traffic became more aggressive during rush hour.
An aggressive marketing campaign boosted their product sales.
He regretted his aggressive criticism of his coworker.
The medicine uses an aggressive formula to fight infection.
Investors noted the company's aggressive expansion into new markets.
She adopted an aggressive fitness routine to prepare for the marathon.
The boxer's aggressive style overwhelmed his opponent in the first round.
He received reprimands for his aggressive answering style in class.
The policy took an aggressive approach to curb inflation.
She used an aggressive tone to negotiate a higher salary.
The river's aggressive current made swimming dangerous.
He took an aggressive pruning method to revive the overgrown hedge.
The lender was criticized for aggressive debt collection tactics.
They launched an aggressive cleanup operation after the spill.
Her aggressive driving earned her several traffic tickets.
The surgeon used an aggressive treatment plan for the patient.
He adopted an aggressive investment strategy with high returns and risks.
The coach praised the team's aggressive defense last night.
She regretted her aggressive workout that led to an injury.
The policy's aggressive fines deterred parking violations.
The kitten used an aggressive swipe to protect its toy.
He faced an aggressive lawsuit after the merger.
The company took aggressive measures to cut costs.
She described the negotiations as aggressive and exhausting.
The weather took an aggressive turn with hail and strong winds.
He spoke in an aggressive whisper that made everyone uneasy.
The software's aggressive scanning removed malware quickly.
He adopted an aggressive stance on climate change policies.
She regretted her aggressive tone when giving feedback.
The strain was so aggressive, it broke the rope instantly.
He faced an aggressive competitor at the chess tournament.
The antibiotic provided an aggressive defense against infection.
She chose an aggressive pruning for quicker tree growth control.
The geopolitical climate became aggressive after the summit.
He dismissed the aggressive rumors as baseless and harmful. Inevitable is an adjective.
It describes something certain to happen and unavoidable. A synonym of inevitable is unavoidable, and an antonym is avoidable.
Change is inevitable in any long-term relationship.
The autumn leaves turning brown felt completely inevitable.
With such debt, default seemed inevitable without drastic cuts.
She saw the breakup as inevitable after months of arguing.
Technological progress is inevitable in modern society.
Traffic jams are inevitable during holiday travel.
Aging is an inevitable part of the human experience.
He accepted failure as inevitable after underestimating the challenge.
Environmental damage seemed inevitable without policy changes.
She felt it was inevitable that the storm would hit the coast.
In sports, injuries are inevitable over a long season.
Repayments sometimes feel inevitable when loans accrue interest.
In a long war, civilian suffering can seem inevitable without ceasefires.
Mistakes are inevitable when learning a new skill.
She believed the merger was inevitable given market pressures.
Outgrowing old friends can feel inevitable over time.
Economic cycles of boom and bust are considered inevitable historically.
He saw professional burnout as inevitable without proper rest.
The sunrise was inevitable after the long night.
She viewed debt collection calls as inevitable after missing payments.
In large projects, delays often become inevitable.
Accepting criticism is inevitable when you share your work publicly.
Evolution is inevitable in biological systems over millennia.
Tears can feel inevitable at the end of a touching movie.
In software releases, bugs are inevitable despite testing.
He realized that misunderstandings are sometimes inevitable between cultures.
Loss of hearing is inevitable with severe ear damage.
With no training, muscle soreness is inevitable after intense exercise.
A recession may seem inevitable after unsustainable growth.
The final chapter's twist felt inevitable once clues were laid out.
In detective novels, confrontations often feel inevitable by the climax.
In life, saying goodbye is inevitable at some point.
Burnout feels inevitable without work-life balance.
Family conflicts may become inevitable during holidays.
In aging machinery, breakdowns can be inevitable without maintenance.
Seeing her former roommate felt inevitable after so many years.
The report concluded that climate change is inevitable without immediate action.
In epic quests, the hero's return feels inevitable at the end. Put a strain on somebody is a phrasal verb.
It means to create pressure or stress on a person.
A synonym of put a strain on somebody is burden somebody, and an antonym is relieve somebody.
The tight deadline began to put a strain on the team.
Financial worries can put a strain on a marriage.
Caring for an elderly parent may put a strain on adult children.
Constant noise from construction put a strain on residents.
Her demanding schedule started to put a strain on her health.
Working 2 jobs can put a strain on personal relationships.
Traffic congestion can put a strain on your patience.
The budget cuts put a strain on public services.
The long commute began to put a strain on his enthusiasm.
Lack of sleep can put a strain on your immune system.
Family disagreements often put a strain on siblings.
The heavy workload puts a strain on new employees.
Chronic illness may put a strain on caregivers.
Market volatility can put a strain on small businesses.
Tight teams can put a strain on communication channels.
Seasonal allergies can put a strain on your productivity.
The subject's complexity put a strain on the student's focus.
Excessive noise levels may put a strain on hearing over time.
Language barriers can put a strain on international teams.
High expectations can put a strain on a young athlete.
Budgeting errors might put a strain on future investments.
Leadership conflicts often put a strain on company culture.
Daily traffic jams can put a strain on mental well-being.
Seasonal flu outbreaks put a strain on healthcare systems.
Unclear protocols can put a strain on emergency responders.
Overcrowded classrooms put a strain on teachers' resources.
Heavy backpacks can put a strain on students' backs.
Unresolved conflicts put a strain on friendships.
Rising costs of living put a strain on household budgets.
The rapid growth put a strain on the server infrastructure.
Unrealistic deadlines put a strain on project quality.
Mismatched teams put a strain on collaboration efforts.
Last-minute changes can put a strain on event planners.
Language courses put a strain on memory when vocabulary piles up.
The merger put a strain on staff morale during the transition.
Long hours at the office put a strain on social life drastically.
Choosing caregivers carefully put a strain on family bonds.
Sudden layoffs can put a strain on remaining employees.
Inconsistent policies put a strain on operational efficiency.
Lack of clarity in roles puts a strain on team dynamics.
Antagonistic neighbors can put a strain on community harmony. That concludes our deep dive into these 5 essential English expressions.
We hope you feel confident using forgive somebody, stare at somebody, aggressive, inevitable, and put a strain on somebody in your conversations.
Thank you for listening, and we look forward to sharing more vocabulary insights next time.
Goodbye and keep practicing every day.